Hello, Wine and Dine listeners. This month, we are going to be featuring a winery called Hanson Vineyards. This is a family-run winery. And the really cool thing that we found out when we were visiting this winery is that the winemaker originally went to college in Ithaca, is from Oregon, but went to college in Ithaca, spent some time in Washington, D.C. He was super cool to talk to because he was more in the lawmaking side. So we had a little conversation about that, and then moved back to Oregon and his family farm with very, very deep roots in the area to, which I loved because they actually have that family farm and very deep roots. Of course, I loved that it was deep roots with Rooted Planning Group, but we had a chance to actually talk with them, with the winemaker when we were there. So much fun. If you want to follow him on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, it's Hanson Vineyards. So you can follow them there. But one thing that I discovered when I was there was that his great-grandfather's winemaker's great-grandfather was originally from Norway and moved to Oregon in 1896, purchased the farm that was across the road from the winery. They then took the property into a winery in 1930. So that's when it says very deep roots. That's what they mean. Well, let me tell you, we love their wine. Of course, they had a good Pinot Noir. That's what Oregon is known for. But today, what I'm going to talk about is their Gamay. The Gamay Noir is one of the different grapes that exists, and we loved it. It was unique. It was dry. It was mouthful, flavorful, really savored the wine. So if you enjoy something different, go try the Gamay Red that they have. It's $26 per bottle. Good price point. Of course, if you're going to have it shipped, there's additional costs associated with it. But we really enjoyed their Gamay. They do have a club that you can join if you're interested. Not trying to sell this company, of course, but I do really think that if you're looking for something different, there's no cost to join, which I absolutely love. If you get out to Oregon, there's complimentary wine tasting for you and your guests. You get 15% off the first 12 bottles each year. And then if you go beyond that, you get 25% off. You also have access to new and limited wines. And they do have some invitations that you can get invited to. One is out in July. Maybe it changes different each year. And then they do invite you to vertical tastings. Now, of course, we won't be able to be there, but we did talk to Jason, the winemaker, and ask if there's any way we could virtually do that. So we're trying to figure out how to do that. If we learn more, we'll certainly let you all know. One thing that I loved that Jason said to us is whether you're a wine connoisseur or a novice, I should say, he's very open to questions. And he really, truly embodied that. So, he said no questions are a dumb question. And we can usually get pretty deep in the weeds if you want, which is what we loved about our conversation. So we'd love for you to hop out onto their website, explore them. We're going to post a link in the Facebook page. And if you do happen to buy anything from them and he wants to know how you found out about us, just drop our name, Amy and Brent Irvine, or Wine and Dime Podcast. Thanks, everyone. We hope you enjoy the rest of the show. Every week, it's my goal to share financial information that helps you in both your life and financial vineyard. We hope it takes you from your roots to the journey of your vines and the influences in the air that have helped craft your delicious life. Like wine, life and finances have different palates that should be celebrated and not judged. Joining me once again today is Becky Eason, one of our wonderful financial planners, and we are talking about fun things like auto insurance. Ugh, poke my eyes out, right, Becky?
Auto insurance is definitely something a lot of people avoid.
And it's really actually very, very important. When we say poke my eyes out, it's something that I think a lot of people realize, okay, I have to have it or whatever, but they don't necessarily understand the parts of it. And they don't necessarily understand the liability importance of it. So maybe let's get into this conversation by breaking it down just a little bit. What are the primary components of auto insurance?
Yeah, so, one of the most important pieces is the liability aspect of it. So you have your liability, and then you've got other components such as like underinsured or uninsured motorist.
Mm-hmm. Let's back up. Do
Okay.
people actually understand what liability insurance is?
Yeah, that's a great question. Liability insurance is if you were at fault, then there's a certain limit on your policy depending on what you select. And your insurance company will cover you if someone tries suing you up to the point of your coverage limit.
Which is really important because if somebody sues you, they're not just coming after your assets, they can also come after your income. And different states have different levels of, what they'll come after and how much they'll come after and what they can come after and what assets they can come after. So we always encourage people to check with their state, requirements or their local insurance agent. But I think this is where, like some states, like Florida, the liability limit is only $11,000. Like that's the minimum. And even in the state of New York, it's only like 50. Like that's what you have to have for the state of New York. We generally recommend a bit more than that. Because if you think about getting sued, 50,000 doesn't go very far in a settlement situation. So liability is pretty important. And then you started to talk about underinsured and uninsured. Maybe talk a little bit about that too.
Yeah. So it's possible that, you might be in an accident with multiple cars and they don't have enough insurance to cover the damage that was actually done. So then at that point, your policy may kick in and help make you whole. It's also very common, like you mentioned in Florida, the liability limit is so low that, that underinsured may help you out if you're in an accident, say in a place like Florida.
Mm-hmm. So if you're traveling, so you're from New York and you're traveling down in Florida and you get in a car accident and they're either underinsured because they only have $11,000 or they're uninsured, which happens a lot in Florida. There's different rules down there on who actually has to carry insurance. So your policy in that situation would kick in and cover the variance to protect you. Those are some key liability issues. It's often the area that people don't really dive into. They tend to focus on things like collision and comprehensive. What are the difference? When people are looking at their policy, like what would the difference be between collision and comprehensive?
Yeah, so collision covers you if you hit another object or a vehicle. So it could be something like hitting a mailbox or another car, and it covers you regardless of fault. Now, comprehensive, or some people refer to it as comp, pays for repairs or replacement due to damage other than by collision. So comp may be something like a tree branch falls on your car.
Mm-hmm.
Or I know around here in Western New York last year, some people had flood damage to their cars, and their comprehensive insurance actually helped cover some of the damage due to the flood.
What about like a deer? Because that's pretty common.
Yes, that is very common.
Knock on wood.
Yeah. And so something like that comp would help you out with.
And sometimes we'll hear people say, well, the vehicle isn't worth enough, so I'm going to drop my collision coverage, right? So if something happens to the car, let's say that they did hit something and they've dropped their collision coverage, that means that the insurance company wouldn't pay, right?
Right. So, that's a risk you're taking because in the grand scheme of things, insurance is something that you hope you never have to use. But if you don't have it, then something happens and you wish you had it. And collision is something that's very common that we see that with.
I hear a lot of people ask that question, like, my vehicle's only worth $4,000. Should I continue carrying collision? Well, they'll usually say comprehensive and collision. And often insurance companies will only let you drop collision. They won't let you drop necessarily comprehensive. Probably depends on the the insurance company itself. But that's something that I hear a lot of people ask. And I think you have to look at the dollar costing of that, right? So is it costing you $50 a month? Well, it might be worth, or $50 a year. I mean, it's probably worth continuing to carry it if that's what the coverage cost is. I know for Brent and I, just as an example, our collision coverage really isn't that much in the grand scheme of things compared to all the other areas of coverage. In really the liability side is where the cost really comes into play more so than anything else.
Right. And it's worth mentioning that if you have any kind of loan on your vehicle, your lender will require you to keep the collision and comp, because if something happened to you, they want to make sure that they're going to get their money.
Yep, that's good point. I know you can play with the like if you're trying to get the cost down for some reason, you can play with the deductible a little bit. We would just want to make sure that if you raised your deductible, that you have enough in your emergency funds that if you had an incident, you'd actually be able to come up with a deductible. Just again, as an example, like Brett and I have $1,000 deductible on our collision side. Our comprehensive side is actually lower than that, but our collision side has $1,000 deductible. We feel that we could absorb $1,000 if there was a situation, requiring us to have to pay for repairs or something like that. So I think if you really want to reduce your premiums in some way, shape, or form, don't eliminate it, just increase the deductible potentially.
Yeah.
And like you said, the bank may require it, so it might not be an option. What are some of the, I want to say, extras that some policies might cover?
So extras may be
roadside assistance.
Roadside assistance, towing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you rent a car, you want to check, just make sure that your coverage should continue with you.
Mm-hmm. That's a big thing. I want to pause on that for a second, because when Brent and I have been traveling this year, this is like our makeup year. We're traveling all over the place. Some of it's for business, some of it's for personal, a couple of years worth of trips that have been postponed down the road. We have rented a car. Like when we were out in Oregon, we rented a car and we called our agent to say, if something should happen when we're renting this, does our policy cover it? And in our situation, the answer to that question was yes. But it doesn't always. And it's the liability side that really can get you going. And there's also sometimes with the credit cards that you use some additional coverage that you can have. But I would call those credit card companies to make sure that that's applicable too. So those could be some of the extras. And maybe you might have been actually talking about, like, if your car is damaged in some way, shape, or form, including a rental car while you're waiting for repairs.
Yeah, both of your points are very valid, though, and great to think about.
And ask those questions, right? Ask what coverage, get to know your coverage so that if you do have to use it, you're not stressing out about it at the time. Right.
That's a great piece of advice, because if you have to use your coverage, chances are it was an accident or something that's emotional and that you're already going to be frazzled about.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the tips that you would give to people when they're looking for auto insurance? And I should mention that Becky is a bit of our guru when it comes to stuff like that. If she doesn't know, she knows who to call. She grew up in a household where her grandfather and her father actually run a auto home protection, like, insurance company. So she's the one that we go to when we don't know the answer to something. So we're thrilled to have her and her family resources at our fingertips. So going back to the question I asked Becky, what are some of the things that people should be looking for when they're seeking out policies, or I think even more importantly, agents?
Yeah, so definitely shop around. It's not a bad thing to ask for quotes from multiple different places, and then do a side-by-side comparison of all the quotes. look at the coverage limits, what the deductibles are, and the premium difference. And then take it a step further and do your research on the companies that come back. So, if you have 6 different policies that you're looking at, dig into each of the companies, make sure that they're reputable, and also contact the agent themselves. Make sure that they're responsive. And, if they're responsive in helping get you the quote, chances are they're going to be there to walk you through a claim. If you, hopefully you don't have to claim on your insurance, but if you do, you want someone who's going to pick up the phone and in some cases even come out to your house and, take pictures of the damage, or, you want that concierge type service.
Well, I think that brings up a good point, because a lot of people will go with like online services. And I'm never a fan of that. We've had that discussion before. Because I have had to use auto insurance in the past because of deer. Like that's my only reason, fortunately, so far that I've ever had to use my auto insurance. Picking up the phone to our agent and saying, okay, what do I need to do? In fact, actually last year, that's what I just said isn't true. Last year, Brent was in a parking lot down in Florida, and one of those big red blood buses came in and actually clipped the back of our vehicle. And we called our agent and they said, well, if we put it through as a claim on your end, then, you're going to have to pay the deductible. What you really need to do is file the claim on their insurance. Having that advice saved us $1,000. That was huge to us. And, in a situation like that, if we didn't have an agent, I'm not sure if they would have told us that.
Yeah. Little pieces of information like that are very beneficial.
So when you're looking for an agent, like you said, make sure that they respond to you. Now, you may call and get their voicemail or get somebody that has to take a message, and because they might be with another client, but make sure that they call you back within a reasonable period of time, especially if it's an emergency. You want to make sure you get that kind of feedback. There's also rating agencies for the actual insurance companies. AM Best, I think, is one of them that's out there that will rate will rate the insurance company itself. So let's say it's an Erie or a Travelers or a Geico or any of those kinds of companies. It'll rate it based on some of that stuff. So you can also do your own research that way. And I think, doesn't Consumer Products or something like that rate them as well?
I'm not real familiar on all those different companies, but I know there are a lot of options out there.
Any tips or suggestions that you would give to people if they're thinking about their auto insurance?
Yeah. Make sure that your coverage limits cover your assets. So, as you progress through your working career and your net worth grows and your income grows, make sure that your, especially your liability coverage, keeps up with your income and net worth.
Mm-hmm.
And don't be afraid to requote every couple of years. Different companies change their rates, and, it's okay to ask your agent or do your own research, ask them to run quotes. In worst case, you stay with your current provider, but you may find a savings or better coverage if you switch companies every couple of years.
And sometimes the existing insurance company that you're with has updated plans. So asking those questions, you may stay with the current company, but they've, like, let's say your credit score is improved or something like that. They may give you a better rate because of that. Or maybe they offer an add-on that at the time, that you originally had the policy written, they didn't have. So it can be beneficial, not just from a cost perspective on, what your premium is, but also a coverage perspective sometimes. I know that's happened with us, where we've been with a company, the same company, for many, many years, but every once in a while I'll reach out to our agent and they'll take a look at what we have and, suggest that, well, we could stay with this company, but did you know that they now have this? And, here's the cost benefit to it. So I think that can be beneficial too. And one other thing that I think is important to bring up is if you have children and your children are getting close to that age of driver ability, or if they are driving, check to see if they're eligible for like good student discounts, or maybe they're just a part-time driver, like college or something like that. You might be eligible for discounts there. You can get discounts through, I think AARP offers a discount or a class that you can take or something like that will give you a discount, like a 10% discount on your auto insurance a lot of different times, a safe driver type class or something. So look for those options that would provide you with those kinds of discounts as well.
Yeah, that's great. We love discounts. Some other discounts that you may be able to get are bundling like your home and auto. So you'd want to run the numbers, because sometimes bundling doesn't always save you. But you could try bundling to get another discount.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think the other thing, and Kate and I are probably going to cover this a little bit in our discussion coming up, but I think when it comes to your auto insurance, also know where your homeowner's insurance might kick in, which sounds odd. Like, why would my homeowner's insurance cover my auto? But there are times where homeowner's insurance actually is the coverage for the auto damage, right?
Yep, exactly.
And know those things, like ask your agent those things. Any other tips or suggestions or ideas, Becky, that you would give to the listeners?
I think another thing would be to look at the premium difference of paying, monthly versus annual, or every 6 months. Some companies, if you pay monthly, they tack on a small extra charge. And some companies have a 6-month policy period and others have a 1 year. So make sure you're aware of the dates and the premium differences.
That's a great tip. Yeah. Thank you so much for suggesting that. That's something I think a lot of people, I hadn't even thought of that one, although I know about it. It just wasn't one that was on the top of my mind. Well, we will also, in the show notes for this episode, we will also provide a checklist for you to walk down through on what issues you should consider when reviewing your property and casualty insurance policies. And of course, if you have any questions or concerns about your policies, we encourage you to reach out to your agent so that they can ask those questions. If you have other questions that you'd like, us to answer, we'd be happy to do that in our Asking for a Friend article. So just send us a no, ask rpg at rootedpg.com or info@rootedpg.com. Either of those will get you to our to one of our financial advisors to answer questions in the future on our blog. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Wine and Dime with Amy Irvine and Becky Eason, and we hope that you'll tune in for future episodes. Please feel free to like us, share us, rate us, comment on us. We want to know what you want to hear, and of course, the more that you do that, the more your friends will find us. Thanks, everyone.
And that will about do it for today's episode of Wine and Dime. You can contact Amy through the website www.rootedpg.com or amy@rootedpg.com. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram @rootedpg for the latest news. And if you have any questions, comments, or topics you would like to hear about, feel free to let us know. And don't forget to rate and subscribe the show wherever you get your podcasts. And again, thank you for listening, and be sure to tune in next time.